this isn't complex, but it is hard. Much like life, right? Eating correctly is not complex, but it can be hard.
Welcome back, everyone, to Life at 10 Tenths, where we inspire you to live at the pinnacle of your ability and purpose. As always, I'm Matt, joined by Garrett, and we also have a very special guest today. My good friend, John Montgomery, is joining us. And John has been in the real estate business for 6 years. He and I have been working together for 4 of those years. And prior to that, he spent 21 years in the military, rising to the rank of lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army as an Army Ranger as well, serving in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And he's also a new author of an incredible book called 4 Buckets, which we're going to talk about today. And you're going to see a theme through today's episode talking about building a real estate business and a team and working with a very different partner, but how that works together, and also getting into like, how do we create the financial security to be able to actually not let a business consume you? So John, welcome, man. It's great to have you.
Hey, good morning. I really appreciate the opportunity. I look up to both of you and I'm thankful for all you do for our community and beyond.
Well, thank you for your service too, John. I mean, I'm sure Garrett probably, we were just talking before we hit record, and you were sharing some things with us, which we'll share throughout this, which is pretty cool. But Garrett, good morning to you too.
Hey, good morning, Matt and John. I'm just, as we get started here, I am so excited to have you on the episode today because, again, one, I'm getting to meet you at a different level than we, in the community, we get a chance to meet each other a fair amount. I get to see you in certain activities that we're involved in, but I don't always get a chance to have a one-on-one like this and get to go kind of in depth into your world. So I am so grateful for you and excited for our time today. So let's jump into this, Matt. I'm excited. He's a fascinating dude, and he's got a great story here and a lot of stuff going on. So I'm excited to get going.
I should say John's also an ultra runner too, so he and I connect a lot.
You attract people like that, Matt. You bring in the
Yeah, we have a good time chatting on that stuff. Well, John, let's dive in, man. Let's start at the real estate story, since that's where a lot of the audience is here. Because you and Robert, your partner, didn't start real estate the traditional way that most people do. You kind of really took a planned approach and we're like, hey, if we're going to do this, this is probably how we want to make this happen. So tell us a little bit about, how you got into real estate, why you did it how you did when you started 6 years ago.
Yeah, so short version, I was still active duty and met an Army officer who was involved in real estate investing. And I've always been very interested in investing, very interested in kind of financial literacy, and that really kind of piqued my interest. So in 2015, after a lot of due diligence and some great mentors, I purchased my first investment property and then kind of started building my portfolio. And as luck would have it, or fate would have it, my mom's best friend just so happened to live in the same town as I do, which is Clarksville, Tennessee, about 40 miles northwest of Nashville. And she was a very prominent realtor in our community for decades. And she took me under her wing and began mentoring me. And as I considered the possibility of going into real estate, residential, commercial, et cetera, outside of the investment space, post-military career. So she gave me the knowledge and confidence to kind of embark on that. And so I got my license while still in the Army, and then kind of immediately joined up with a brokerage, which is Crylike Realtors. And then my business partner, who came to be my business partner, Robert Roof, he and I served in the military together. So we already knew each other very well. And we knew a lot of those key things about one another that are essential in the event you were to form a partnership.
When you guys basically kind of launched in very early on as a partnership where most people are like, hey, I'm going to kind of figure it out being an individual. And you guys also were like, hey, you know what? We also want to make sure we have the right support so we can focus on our relationships. And you hired a transaction coordinator very, very early on, right?
Yeah. So my mom's friend, Sheila, she was retired, but she became my transaction coordinator. And at first, she was just kind of helping me out, right? Mentor, mentee type thing. And, but I took so much from her, and she was very detail oriented. I'm not, I'm kind of big picture, macro level. We can kind of get into, all the differences between Robert and I, but she helped me out and allowed me to focus on my strengths, which are, connecting with people and getting out and doing what I love and just kind of fostering relationships. And that's kind of my strength. And then Robert retired about 6 months after I did. And as we kind of started looking at the space and the market in our area, we looked at scalability and really kind of what our goals were. And hopefully today we'll kind of get into kind of the business planning and some of those goals. I know 10 Tenths is working through that right now. And to me, that's so critical, because if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a why, it's easy to just say, oh, I want to make X number of dollars. Well, why? And then looking at your market and trying to understand, like, is that feasible? Is that feasible as an individual agent with no assistance, no team, no partner, et cetera? So long and short of it, that's ultimately what led to us creating a partnership.
So John, really interesting as you're getting started with all of this. You approach this way more as a business than most people approach real estate as. A lot of people kind of get into it going, oh, get my real estate license and won't this be fun? And we'll sell some homes and, make some money and kind of get my myself going in this. And, that element of coming in and saying, okay, well, one, I have this mentor now who is going to turn into a transaction coordinator. And that's kind of how that worked. Most people don't have a good mentor. Then you have a great business partner that you started this thing right off from the beginning of, from what I'm hearing, which is, most people don't do that. They bumble around for a little bit. And then as they get, years down the road, they're like, I'll bring somebody in. Is that a military background, or is that a John background that you come from, of surrounding yourself with people to help you get to a common goal? What would you say that comes from for you?
I think the military helped create that mindset, because the military, and I'll speak of the Army because that's what I'm most familiar with, it is, the greatest meritocracy that I know of, so to speak. And I don't mean a financial meritocracy. I don't mean you're compensated based on your performance, so to speak. But I do believe that it is as fair an environment as I've seen that rewards, performance and potential. And it provided me with multiple opportunities to self-assess. And I quickly realized that it's a team sport. And whether, as an enlisted person, whether it's the platoon leader, leading 30 to 40 soldiers, or, a company level commander where you're talking 80 to 130 soldiers, you're not doing that by yourself. And you realize quickly, well, what are my strengths? And so I realized quickly that there are a lot of components to the real estate space that weren't necessarily my strengths. And sure, I can do them. I can plod forth and do them. We're not talking about, neuroscience or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, how much time am I spending on areas of weakness as opposed to really capitalizing on my strengths?
I love it.
Well, and John, you have this kind of, and I would be curious to hear too, like, is this also something that's come out of the military for you, your sense of discipline? I mean, 21 years in the military is certainly a long time to develop a lot of skills and rewire some things in your brain. But you also see a lot of people come out of the military and kind of just, do other things too. And they're not as disciplined in getting into something like business. Although I would say the people that Garrett and I have had the pleasure of working with over the years, there is this interesting trait about people, veterans who get into real estate, and there's just kind of a different level of intention that comes along with that.
Intensity.
Yeah.
Intensity. That's what I notice.
There definitely intensity. And, we were talking before too about, okay, now also making sure you're surrounding yourself. So what is it like, coming out of the military where you have that meritocracy environment into real estate and out of brokerage and working to build a team where you don't have people who naturally have that sense, right? And I mean, we were saying like the number of times we've gifted people things and you're like, come on, take this, run with it, So how was that transition for you and being able to manage, okay, this is no longer life or death. These are still important things we're working with, the purchase and sale of homes, but now the audience isn't as intense as you are.
Yeah, so the military environment is disciplined. In other words, there is a hierarchical structure that is easily identified, right? There's a rank structure. There's a uniform code of military justice. There are standards that you are compelled to meet. There are repercussions for failing to meet the mark, right? So that's one type of discipline. In other words, you show up late, you're going to be disciplined. That said, that is different than self-discipline. Self-discipline, like right now, no one's going to punish me for not waking up on time, for not eating the way I'm supposed to eat, for not working out for not completing the training that I said I was going to complete today. That's self-discipline. And to me, that's the differentiation and why a lot of people might excel when they're immersed in a disciplined environment, but then begin to falter when they leave that environment.
I could see that if you start to rely on that person, it's like almost like your parent that's waking you up every morning to go to school. And you kind of get that, like, if they don't figure out how to get themselves out of bed and get them going at some point in time, the minute that parent's not there for them, they're sleeping because they rely on it so much. That's a really interesting point, the way you just said that, at least if I heard you the way that I interpreted it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
so John, like because you've only been in the business 6 years, which is a good amount of time, but it's also not an incredible amount of time. But I feel like you've experienced what maybe some realtors who've been in the business even 20 years haven't, in terms of also creating a structure for yourself that also allows you to enjoy life. Like you get to go up to Kentucky and go hunting and fishing and enjoy those things without having to worry about, the deal that's going on at home, at least not, actively in some cases. It certainly might be in your head. So what did you do to develop that self-discipline, and what have you seen others do to develop that for themselves as well?
Yeah, so we didn't form the partnership from the get-go. I did have experience on my own, but I quickly realized that in order to create and then effectively run the business that I wanted, I would be what we often refer to as working deployment hours. And so when you're deployed, especially that initial phase of a deployment, it's nonstop. And this is a strength and a weakness, but one of my defaults is work. So I know how to work. I know how to grab the oars, put my head down and go to work. And so, I may not be the most talented, but I always prided myself on the fact that I would try to outwork that lack of talent. And so I quickly realized when I transitioned to real estate that I was working deployment hours and I didn't necessarily see an end in sight. And if I wanted to achieve the goals that I set out to achieve. And so I quickly realized that I would need to create some sort of team to help with that, because life's not about just making money. And Matt, you've known me for a long time. I rarely talk about money. I talk about, have I set SMART goals? Am I achieving those goals? Are we building a team? Who are we coaching? How are we, who are we giving to, et cetera? So, money is important. But again, if you don't have a strong enough why, you're probably not going to realize contentment.
So, John, you brought up the why a couple times, and I'm curious with you starting your partnership, and you said having a clear mission and goal and alignment as you guys kind of got this thing going. What was that underlying why and goal up front for saying, okay, I want to bring in, let's say, a transaction coordinator? Early on, you hired a coach to say, okay, let me get real formulated around this part of the business. And then you also have this partnership that you created. If you had to look back and go, what was my mission up front? Was it to create life so you could have, earn, make the money you wanted to make, but also be able to go out and go hunting and go do other things? Or was there another vision around that you had for yourself as you started this out and bringing these people together?
Yeah, so I have this, if you can picture it, it's this model I kind of created. Think of a pie plate, right? And you can just sketch this out on a piece of paper that may be divided into, 5 to 10 elements. And those elements represent different facets of life. Everything from spirituality, fitness, learning, family, career, travel, adventure, what have you. And then within each of those pie pieces, I would formulate goals. So let's say each piece has 3 goals. Maybe in the spirituality piece, it has, read the Bible in a year, read through the Bible in a year, volunteer at church, and then volunteer in a faith-based something, once a month, right? And then I do that for all of those pieces of the pie, and then I try to find a mentor for each of those, right? And or an accountability partner. So obviously for the career component, I had goals, and then it was like, okay, well, who's my mentor? Well, Matt's my mentor now. He's my coach. And I have other mentors. But so that was real important. So really, to answer your question, Garrett, it was, how do I create a business that helps me achieve this kind of harmonious life that isn't lopsided, right? I don't want all my eggs in just a career balance, because where's the adventure? Where's the faith? Where's the family, the friends, the learning, etc.? So I use that model to help kind of create the life, and real estate helps fund that life.
The balance wheel, right? The life wheel. I love it. And I like the assigning 3 goals into each category, right? And most of the time, particularly now as we're doing business planning, and we took a different approach this year than we have in prior years of really emphasizing life goals first before we even got into income goals and SMART goals.
Absolutely.
But it's something that a lot of people don't do. Right.
Before we leave this, the finding a mentor for each one of those areas, or an accountability partner for each one of those areas. I mean, we're doing business planning right now. By the time this goes live, business planning's done. We're almost going, we're into December here. But what's really interesting is that so many people throw up a ton of goals, and they go, okay, this year I'm going to go, these are all the things I'm going to go do, and it's awesome, and we're excited about it, and they lose sight of it very quickly. February, we're not even looking at those anymore. We're just head down working again and getting through this stuff. And John, I got to commend you for bringing mentors and specific people in your life to say, look, no, you are now attached to this pie that I have which is making sure that we hit these 3 goals. And I love that you said you had 3 goals for each one of those, because when you have the goal set and the person there that's now going to keep you in alignment with it, it's pretty hard not to be successful in those areas. Really hard.
Very. Yeah. And you know, and it keeps you accountable, Garrett, because I don't want to be the smartest, fastest, strongest person in any room. Right. So, you know, I don't want to, you know, my spiritual advisor is someone I look to that I feel has it more together than me. You know, my financial advisor has it, you know, a greater net worth than me. You know, my fitness advisor, you know, if I want to run a 100-mile race, you know, I'm not going to probably choose a mentor that's not run a marathon. Right. So, you know, it keeps you humble, you know, and it keeps you looking at other people who've kind of been there, done that. And to me, that's inspiring. It keeps me humble. And, you know, one of my running mentors, I have several, in several of the gentlemen I'm thinking of, they're all in their mid 60s and still running 100+ mile races, still out there every day, getting after it. And it's just so inspiring.
That really is. And on the accountability part too, it doesn't have to be like hardcore accountability. I mean, gosh, if I miss a morning of posting just like a smiling face after my workout, I'm going to hear it from John, because John's like, "Hey, did you not work out today?" Or, you know, I get at least some reprieve on the weekends because I don't post on the weekends. But I went through a phase where I wasn't posting, and John's like, "You still working out?" I was like, "I am. I just haven't been posting," right? Which is great. Well, John, the financial component too, you said real estate's got to fund all these things too, but you've had a history of just like really good financial discipline yourself as well, which is why you've now written this book called 4 Buckets: Achieving Financial Freedom. And I think this is a really important area for realtors, because you look at your career, I'm still going to say it's a relatively short real estate career so far, but you've also achieved at a level of fiscal responsibility that allows you to be comfortable and not have that commission breath that a lot of people do still maybe 10, 20 years into the business. So tell us a little bit about your history with your financial acuity and discipline there, and what you've seen work for you to be able to set up a structure like that.
Yeah. So I wasn't always financially responsible, as you might imagine.
How the stories begin, right?
Right. And so I talk a little bit about that in the book. You know, I credit my wife, Crystal, and just getting married and all of a sudden realizing that, hey, it's time to man up. It's time to be responsible. It's time to be a leader. And that leadership involves financial responsibility, financial literacy. And really then it was having mentors who knew a lot more than me and just kind of buying into what they said. Like, I started investing in the market, you know, think Wall Street, when I was 20 years old. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a mentor who I listened to, and I said, okay, you know, and that kind of started a lifelong habit of investing. And the older I got, I just realized the importance of it. And I think so many people go through life and they don't have a plan for their income. And without a plan, you're not gonna get to where you want.
Oh, I'm just gonna buy the new car or buy this, or
right.
You know, it's like I'm just gonna run my income instead of saving.
100%. And I kind of the epiphany was when I understood the difference between assets and liabilities. Think Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? So that really opened my eyes, and I was like, okay, how do I set conditions to begin generating passive income? Because at some point, I'm either not going to be able to work and trade time for money, or I won't want to work. And so that spurred really kind of segueing into the real estate investment space. And so ultimately that led to the creation of this book, 4 Buckets. And what I attempted to do was create a very user-friendly, practical guide that whether you're 10 or 70, you can quickly read and implement into your daily life. And I think I really believe in it. There's nothing new under the sun when it comes to, financial discipline, etc. But I tried to create a book where every page is standalone. So if it's on your nightstand, every page, it's either a standalone quote or a standalone paragraph with a nugget of wisdom that you can immediately action. And, you've seen it, the cover is, I'll show you the cover. It's a napkin with 4 buckets, and it's representative of just this system and how easy it is. You can be sitting at a coffee shop, you draw 4 buckets, you put give, save, invest, spend, and just with that simple picture, you can explain a very quality proven system to generate financial freedom. And ultimately, I argue that leads to financial independence.
For a lot of people, John, they just need a plan. And as we were just talking about, we lightly mentioned on the average person's plan is hoping for a raise. And that'll allow them to be able to then finally save a little bit when they get that raise. And all they do is they raise their actual living, surroundings. And then it's like they're just waiting for the next raise so they can maybe save a little bit and prepare for retirement and whatnot. And they never quite get there. And I think part of being able to be disciplined is you got to have some sort of a plan to be disciplined to up front. I'm always amazed at how little this is taught in our society and how little it is actually leaned into about helping people become financially responsible and be able to have any sort of plan, whether it's 4 buckets or anything. And not everybody's going to go read Robert Kiyosaki's book, or they'll get stuck in the weeds on that. So it's almost like the simplicity side of this is what I'm loving is that let's keep it simple. This isn't a rocket science thing. This is just being disciplined with a simple plan, which I love.
Yeah, I write in the book, this isn't complex, ... but it is hard. Much like life, right? Eating correctly is not complex, but it can be hard.
Running a real estate business doesn't have to be complex, but
Right.
It can be hard, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are very few barriers to entry into the real estate space, but it's extraordinarily difficult to actually earn a legitimate living as a real estate professional. And HGTV doesn't show that, right?
No.
But very, very few people who claim to be real estate professionals earn legitimate income.
Yeah.
So, John, let me ask this, because I have a dream of writing a book. Matt and I have joked about writing a book together. Not really joked. We've kicked it around as a plan for the future to write a book together. What was the moment for you that you said, I want to write a book about this? Like, I want to share what I have learned, my simple napkin drawing plan to be like, I need to help people understand this. What got you there?
My time in the Army, working with young soldiers, seeing how many people are just beyond stressed out regarding finances. And I teach a leadership course at Austin Peay State University, and I teach the sophomores, so 19, 20-year-old students. And I always ask every class, what are your concerns about post-college life? And maybe not surprisingly, but financial stability is high on the list. And so I began kind of teaching this methodology, if you will, years ago. And then I just finally decided to try to capture it. And I also wanted to do something that our daughters, Ashley and Autumn, could, be proud of. And so I dedicated the book to them. And I think it's a very useful tool.
So tell us a little bit, not giving away the book, but a little bit of the insight into, okay, why the 4 buckets: give, save, invest, and spend. And then there's kind of a fifth bucket there too, right? That
right.
Exists, at least. You don't call it bucket 5, but there's kind of this one entity that we kind of all are having to deal with at some point. So give us a little bit of like tactical insight into, okay, why that order? Because I know there's a logical order to that as well, and maybe a simple tool for each of those buckets that somebody could implement starting today if they've never even thought about, like, I don't even have any money to give, right?
If you were to implement this plan, it flies in the face of a lot of what our culture is promoting, right? Keeping up with the Joneses, always having the latest and greatest, et cetera, et cetera. But what I argue in the book is that every dollar that comes into your possession should have a purpose, and it can be, envisioned as such. First, give a percentage away. And history is replete with examples, whether it be in the spiritual space, the secular space, doesn't matter, replete with examples of what giving does for you. Not to mention how it benefits the people you're giving money to, right? So I argue, first and foremost, give 10% away, right? Then I talk about saving and why to save. So I argue to give first and why to give. Then I argue save, why to save, and what percent I argue to save. And I talk about investing, and that's where we're going to start generating passive income. We're purchasing assets, things that increase in value over time. I talk about what percentage to invest. Then I talk about the 4th bucket, which is spend. So obviously at this point, we've already paid ourselves, so to speak. And even through giving, I argue that that's in effect paying yourself. So we've given, we've saved, we've invested. Now we have money to spend. And then in the 5th bucket, which I titled Caesar's bucket, right? We can't escape taxes. And so that's that 5th bucket that no one likes to talk about. But really, especially for my fellow realtors, this is not difficult. You can literally go to the bank and set up 5 accounts, right? I mean, you can have a giving account, a saving account, an investment account, a tax account, and then your sending account, your checking account. So I talk about how to do that, but most importantly, I talk about why to do it. And I think it's very, very practical, and I think a lot of people can implement it. And I give stories about how each of the buckets came to be in my life, and I'm hopeful that resonates with people.
John, there's an interesting thing as you're kind of going down through your buckets here, and I was kind of chuckling to myself that I feel like the average person, and I don't think a lot of our people listening are not the average people out there, but a lot of the average people look at it as, well, the money that I really get to use that's mine is the money I get to spend. And if they're investing it or if they're putting into a savings account, it's like, well, that's not mine anymore. It's not me. I can't use it. I can't play with it. I can't go do fun stuff. I can't live this life I want to live. And you don't realize that that money's still yours. And not only is it yours, it's growing for you now, and it's working for you when you have these areas over here. And you talk about giving, and that raises the energy of everybody around you when you get a chance to give. But I think changing that mentality on the saving and the investing side, that you're not without that money, you're without it for the moment. But the reality is it will give you financial freedom. Like, that is the way that you get to walk away and say, I don't need to do this rat race anymore. I don't need to, I'm not here working for the dollar or stressing over the dollar anymore. When you figure out your buckets, and so many people just, it's a put some in the bank, spend the rest. Maybe. So love this.
So John, like that discipline of going through that method, which, by the way, guys, this book is available now. You can pre-order it at Amazon.com. It will officially be released February 3rd, but definitely go and buy this book. Go pre-order it because that contributes to day one sales. And we really want to make this book a bestseller because I've read the book, and this is a book you can give to your kid. You can give to a friend. It's a very easy read, and it's not like, oh, you have to read the whole thing to get the whole concept. It's like, as you said, John, you set it up in a way where you can open up to a page and be like, oh yeah, maybe I should have a little bit of that going on in my life right now. And so go check it out. 4 Buckets on Amazon. And John, the discipline that comes around with something like this, like kind of now pushing this back into, okay, earning income, particularly through real estate, as you've been doing here. Would you say that your discipline in running those 4 buckets has also helped you with your why and motivation to also earn more than the average realtor, right? Because the average realtor, I think we're still somewhere in the $50,000 to $60,000 a year income for the average realtor, which has held steady for many, many years. And you look at inflation and all these other stuff over just the past 4, that's not really probably where any realtor wants to be. And you're certainly not there. So how has that discipline contributed to your ability to earn so that you can also live comfortably too? Like, cause it's not like you're also living in a tent or anything because you've saved all your money. You have a nice house, you get to go fishing on the weekends and all that kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the self-discipline required to create a lifestyle is extraordinarily important. And so what I quickly realized was that I needed to create predictability in my real estate business, because if you look at it, our markets fluctuate. There are so many external variables beyond our control, whether it be interest rates, whether it be the presidential elections, whether it be zoning changes, you name it. We cannot control so many facets of the market. That said, there are a plethora of things we can do to add predictability. That's why I'm such a believer in 10/10. That's why I'm such a believer in, the Ninja 9. That's why regardless of what the market's doing, regardless of what the morning news says, I know that I need to wake up, work out, go to work, and do a set number of things that are going to, it's basically scientifically proven, produce results. And I have now 6 years of data that I can look at. We had a new agent Tuesday at our sales meeting, and he was very concerned about, fluctuating levels of income. Could he make it? And I said, I'm telling you, this is as scientific a model as you can have. And I'm proof positive. I'm no one special. That if you adhere to this, put it into practice, it will produce results. And so that, coupled with what I write in the book, has allowed me to create a business and then be purposeful with the income that that business generates.
Well, and I say, like, your intention with the business is great. You're one of the only people I know that pre-fills out your 50 live contacts for the week. And which is a method that I've been telling a lot of people to do. Hey, you don't know who to, instead of counting your contacts at the end, plan them out in the beginning. And if anybody would see John's planner, you will see on Monday, there's 50 names down there, not people he's talked to, people he's going to talk to. Right. And what's amazing about this, John, and watching you and Robert evolve with this over the years and trying to get other people on board with that level of intention is that it has allowed you to escape deployment hours. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I got to put all that work. It's like, yeah, but doing that work actually saves so much time on the back end, because then you have all of this intention of where your communication is going to go. And yeah, deals are going to come in. There's going to be issues. There's going to be stuff that you deal with and manage, but executing on the business activities, John, how much time would you say you spend each week after you get all that stuff planned out, then actually going through and making those contacts happen, doing your real estate reviews, doing all the other stuff that actually brings business in?
So the way I divide up my days is that mornings are spent typically working, in the business, on the business activities, my Ninja 9, my personal notes that I've already determined who I'm writing to for that week. So that's 10 notes. The real estate reviews, I already know who I'm writing. So that's how I typically spend the first portion of the mornings. And then that really frees me up to get out and talk with people. That's what I really like to do. Matt, you mentioned it being on your podcast, your all's podcast with Roger Gans, you mentioned it being a contact sport. So if you put that work in, and for me, that means going to the office, because that's another discipline, right? And I love teamwork. I love collaboration, etc. I love the energy. But then that allows me to go out and contact other individuals.
It's interesting when you understand that you have the intention behind it and you have a plan behind it. And there's very few people, I think I've only known one other in the 20 years that I've coached people, that actually write out their 50 people before they actually start their week. It's a really unique process that works really well. Because when you have that intention up front and you have the plan behind it, the excuses are really hard to, like, this just showed up and that's why I couldn't do this. Well, you didn't have a great plan to begin with up front. I went to the gym this morning and the gym was closed. Well, what did you do? Well, I went home. Well, that wasn't the intention was to go work out. What did you do to go and make sure you can continue to do what you needed to do? And I think so many people run into this where it's like they're waiting for their surrounding and their environment to work perfectly for them to get their results that they want. And if you have the right intention, you got the right goal set, the right mindset, you're going to figure it out with whatever the surroundings are given to you. And I think, John, that's what I've learned from just being with you this short amount of time so far is that discipline and that intention allows you to say, okay, I know what I'm doing here. Whatever the environment is, I'm going to make sure that this is going to happen for me. Really powerful.
Yeah, Garrett. And real quick, let me elaborate on that. If that seems for someone listening too big a task, too big of an ask, I'll tie it into the giving bucket in the book, right? If right now you're not at a space in life to give 10% of what you earn, it doesn't matter. Start with something. Maybe it's $5. Maybe it's $5. Commit to giving $5 a week $5 a check, right? But that's going to start a habit. It's the same thing with filling out your contacts prior to the week beginning. If 50, maybe you don't have 50 people in your sphere of influence. Okay, start with 5. Start with one person each workday and start there. That's going to create a habit. You know, we don't start by running an ultra marathon. We start by, can we walk around the block? Can we walk a mile? Can we do a 5K, 10K, half marathon? So don't let some of this conversation become overwhelming and just throw it out the window. Just start and form that habit, and you'll be amazed at how quickly you're achieving the results and ultimately going, it's not hard to write 10 letters a week. It's not hard to talk to 50 people a week.
It is amazing how it compounds like that, right? I mean, it's just get started at whatever level's comfortable, and you're going to see how quickly that just evolves, which I think is incredible. Well, you know, John, you mentioned Roger's episode too. I think one thing that's been unique for you as well is you constantly seek out other people as well to surround yourself with the right people. You mentioned earlier, you don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. So tell us a little bit about, you know, how you go about that, maybe using Roger as an example of like, hey, this sounds like someone I want to be connected to.
Yeah. So in a 10 Tenths podcast, you interviewed Roger Gans, who was a realtor from Portland, Oregon, who for a variety of reasons decided that he and his family wanted to move to a new location. So in an extraordinarily courageous and bold act, he and his wife and children, they decide to move to Montana. And I'm listening to this story and I'm inspired, because how many people are out there and they're satisfied with the status quo. And I'm using satisfied in air quotes because they're really not satisfied, but the status quo is safe. It's comfortable. If you dug deep, it's probably not where they'd dream of being. But Roger and his wife said, you know what? We're going to take a courageous leap of faith. We're confident in ourselves. We're confident in our business models that we're going to do this. So they up and leave to Montana. And lo and behold, what do they find? What typically happens? The worst things don't happen. He ends up putting into place the same model that basically allowed him to be a successful realtor in Portland, allow him to be a successful realtor in Montana, and lo and behold, he's now living the dream, right? And so I listened to this story and I'm like, okay, I need to connect with him, right? If nothing else than to just applaud him for, one, being open to going on a podcast, which again, you are putting yourselves out there, and your guests are to some extent, because this is recorded. What if I say something that I misspeak? I say something that's inadvertently incorrect. I mean, now it's on the record. So there is some courage that even goes along with that.
John, we have an entire blooper reel for that, by the way. Don't worry, we'll share that with you at some point.
Excellent. But you know, I just wanted to reach out to him and say, hey, your story resonated with me. I appreciate you sharing that. And who knows what it could lead to? I mean, he invited you all to go down the river with him. You know, how cool would that be to do some sort of like 10 Tenths working group in Montana? I mean, who knows? You know, you do a 10 Tenths retreat at Roger's place. I don't know, but like, that's the kind of people I want to be around, you know?
You have to do one at your land in Kentucky too. Go for a hunt.
I mean, I really believe that, you know, Cameron Haynes, who's an ultra athlete, a Western bow hunter, he talks about surrounding himself with outliers. And I love that, you know. Doesn't matter the field, whether it's athletics, whether it's business, what have you, but finding those people who are uncommon, outliers, those are the people who I tend to be most inspired by and who I learn the most from.
John, I think it's amazing how you know, as Matt was bringing out about you know, listening to Roger's podcast and then basically reaching out to him. And you've done the same thing in our coaching community at the 11 Circle, is that, you know, you were sharing with me before, it's like, oh my gosh, like this opportunity to reach out and connect with all of these like-minded individuals. And I think that what a lot of us don't fully grasp a lot is the world that we get to grow into and the levels that we get to go to. It's not on our own. A lot of people look at this and go, oh, that person was successful because they had some golden key that allowed them to be successful. And 9 times out of 10, it's who you surround yourself with and the connections you make. And we have all these amazing people around us. And what you just did by reaching out to Roger and complimenting him and learning a little bit from him and building a simple friendship there, those are the pieces that make people successful in their life and in their world. It's not them on their own, just head down, pushing through stuff. And everything that you shared with me today and what I've watched with you is that you are a master of bringing great people in around you. And I hope that people hear that, because the opportunities of great people are all around us. But sometimes we second guess. Oh, should I reach out to them? Oh, would it be weird if I like sent them a note just to say how much I appreciate them? And it's like, no, they love it so much. Roger got a hold of me after you did that, after you reached out going, I don't know what you did, but I've got people reaching out all over the place. And so, John, I just want to say thank you. You bring the real energy that I think this world needs.
I appreciate that.
And I would say, John, you're one of those outliers too, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if now people are like, well, if I need to connect with outliers, I need to connect with John too. So John, how would people connect with you? Where would they find you if they wanted to reach out?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, you know, John J. Montgomery. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find our team, JR Group Partners, on Instagram. Yeah, and I, you know, Matt, you know, I'm passionate about, you know, helping people, you know, reach their goals. And Garrett, to caveat on what you said, like this business for the realtors watching, and most businesses, you know, it's based on relationships. And who else better to refer a client to than someone who's, you know, involved in coaching, which is lifelong learning, right? Which is, you know, striving to be a better version of yourself. Well, that's who I want to refer my clients to. You know, if I've got a client moving to Montana, well, who am I thinking of? Well, I'm probably thinking of Roger, you know? Because, you know, just in that short introduction to his story, like it resonated with me. And I'm like, okay, this is the guy cut from a similar cloth, you know? He's speaking my language, so to speak.
I love it. I love it, man. Well, John, really appreciate you coming on and sharing this stuff. You know, before we though end, you shared what's hanging on the wall behind your camera with us. And I think this would be so cool for people to see who are watching. So if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or whatever, you're going to have to go over to YouTube to see this. But John has a really, really cool thing that highlights this incredible career you've had in the military. John, can you share that with us?
Yeah. So I'll just kind of turn the camera around here. So a real good friend of mine, Glenn Baird, made this flag, and it holds all of the coins that people gave to me during my time in the Army. And, you know, each one has a story. You know, this French patch was given to me on a ridge top in Afghanistan as I boarded a helicopter with a French officer. We traded patches. That patch right there was worn in Iraq. I was partnered with an Iraqi infantry commander. And so just all of these coins have special meaning to me. That coin up there was basically one of the first I got with the kind of the blue background musket. Next to that is my grandpa's dog tag from like 1943. So anyway, just a bunch of memories, and it's cool just to have.
John, I'm so happy you went through that, because you started to, before we hit record, John was sharing those with us, and I was like, wait, hold on a second. Like, talk about the stories when you talk about Roger and learning what makes Roger, and why we connect with people. And as you were saying that, I'm like, there's so many people out there that will connect with your background and an experience that very few people have ever been on a ridgetop with a French commander boarding a helicopter and being like, hey, dude, let's trade patches. That is something that very few of us can relate to, but all of us appreciate. And I just want to say thank you so much, not only for your service, but for sharing that with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a blessing to be able to serve, and lifelong friendships, lifelong experiences, and it was pretty special.
And great business partners too.
Absolutely.
Well, to put a bow on this, John, I want to say thank you so much for taking time with us today. I also want to say thank you so much for being part of our coaching community, 11 Circle, and is the involvement that you have in there and the connections that you're making with people. It really is the dream that I have of what I want that coaching circle to be and that coaching community to be. So just want to say thank you so much, because your energy and your life you bring into it is what I see this growing as we're still very much getting this kicked off. And I just want to say thank you with that. So.
Well, thank you both. And, I wish you the absolute best. I truly believe in 10 tenths, and appreciate your friendship, and God bless you both.
Yeah. You as well, John. And thanks again, man. Really appreciate you. And again, guys, get 4 buckets on Amazon. Go pre-order it. Subtitle Achieving Financial Freedom by John Montgomery. Go get that, pre-order it. Let's turn them into a bestseller. Garrett?
And everybody, just saying thank you to all of you for listening and participated in this episode today. If you want to learn more about what we've got going on at Life at 10 Tenths, you can go to lifeat10tenths.com. You can also go, and we have the 11 Circle, which is our coaching program that John's involved with. And we have an amazing group of people in there. We just did business planning. So anybody listening to this, whether you're listening to a recording and this is a year later, or you're listening to it when it is released, you can jump in there. Get your business planning for 2025. Get this year kicked off in the best way you possibly can. And we'd love to have you as part of our world. So John, thank you. Matt, thank you. And grateful for time with both of you guys today.